The reason that success and abundance is not just part of your everyday life and you still seek it and you are still looking for it is because you are at all points of your life rejecting it from actually stepping into your life. Because success and abundance in pretty much everything that you do is a natural thing for the higher self. And you can operate either from the higher self or from the ego. When you're operating from the ego, you are always rejecting the higher self and the abundance and the success that the higher self so effortlessly brings with it. Now, in order to explain this, I would suggest you to stay here and listen from beginning to end, because this is quite life-changing, what I'm about to share with you. But basically, that sounded very Swedish. Basically, what is going on here is that the ego has beliefs, it has ideas that makes it feel like it doesn't deserve the love, the abundance, and the success that the higher self brings with it. And so as soon as the higher self starts to be more of who it is that you are in this life, basically, I would say that the higher self is the awareness that you are. It is connected deeply to source, to consciousness, which operates out of that frequency of love and abundance. And when you are being here in this state, everything just starts becoming of that nature. But the ego steps into the picture and has beliefs and ideas about how much it is that you're actually worthy of, how much it is that you deserve to have. So that is where our sabotage comes in. That is so common, that is so usual. And the sabotage arrives in a million different ways. It could be your overthinking thoughts, your worries, your doubts, your insecurities. You're holding yourself back. You're focusing on pleasuring other people and their emotions. You're trying to cater to them. You are following in the footstep of others because you're afraid of existing in this place of abundance. And the reason that this happens is because the ego, as it is experiencing more abundance, more of the higher self, starts to get very, very uncomfortable, starts to get extremely uncomfortable. And this is where the ego is operating in this space of trying to remain comfortable. And something that can be very hard to grasp is the fact that having a lot of abundance and success is extremely painful for an ego that believes it isn't worthy of it. So that is where, in a lot of cases, we actually come into the picture and we try to create more things, better things for our lives. And then as soon as we start to see that that change starts to occur, the ego gets more and more active. We fall more back into our old patterns, into our addictions. We fall back into old way of doing things because the ego starts to become very uncomfortable with all of this success and abundance that is starting to show up into our lives. And this is something that I was feeling this morning, actually. I woke up and I felt just really amazing. I've been giving myself a lot more permission to just operate as my higher self lately, to operate in this place of greater awareness in my everyday life, where I don't run off to my old patterns of distractions that my ego is using a lot of the time. And I've been quite committed to it now for a little while, and as a result of that, I've been starting to feel more abundance inside of myself. And then I woke up this morning and I was feeling really amazing. Everything is feeling so good, you know. And then all of a sudden, the ego starts to kick in a little bit. And it's almost like a sensation that starts growing in your body that something is off. Something is not right. And that is the ego that is trying to hijack your awareness back into it as to move along into some pattern of thoughts of overthinking, of worrying, of trying to just simply move you out of this place of abundance, because the ego is very uncomfortable at this point with this elevated state of abundance that reminds it that it's not good enough to have it. This is the source of all of our programs. The ego that is trying to run away from the pain of realizing that, oh, now I'm getting too much good. And as I'm getting too much good, this belief that I'm not inherently good enough gets triggered more and more and more and more. So as you are starting your journey of being more of your higher self, existing more in this present moment, you always have to stay Is the vigilant the right word? But you always have to stay like aware. You have to stay aware of when the ego is trying to come in and take control again. And yeah, it's an ongoing thing, because you're always showing the ego at the same time that it's okay to exist in this place of abundance by not allowing yourself to move back into those old habits, into those old ways of doing things, into those old sabotaging ways that we used to reduce our living situation or our being back into those comfortable and known places. Because that is how the ego operates. It tries to keep us in the same little bubble where it has been known to exist in for a long time, because this is exactly where it deems us to be worthy of living in. The more that you believe that you are worthy of, the more that your reality will start to reflect that just effortlessly. And your higher self, of course, knows that you're worthy of everything. You are worthy of the highest form of love and abundance. But it's about also merging these two together and find peace between them, between the ego and the higher self. And I had a comment today, or yesterday. There was a person that said, this is a very good video that you're making, because before I always thought that the ego was the enemy. I thought that I had to change the ego. I had to kick him out and make him fuck off or something like that. But this is such a big misunderstanding, and it also just feeds the problem here. Because the ego naturally surrenders when it feels loved and accepted, which is something I talked about in my video from yesterday, so feel free to check that out if you haven't. But basically, the ego just surrenders to the higher self when it feels like it's okay to exist in this space. So the ego, when you are moving back into self-sabotaging ways, into old patterns, is feeling in this moment like it's not good enough and that it's not allowed to exist here, right? So you gotta show it that it is okay. And the way that you show it that it is okay to embrace this new level of abundance and success that you're starting to experience as you're moving up the ladder here, back into your higher self, is to remain in the seat of your higher self as the ego is starting to throw its temperament, starting to throw its tantrums. Because the ego is like a little child, just looking for your attention and validation. And you can give it to it by giving it the loving awareness that it's looking for to exist as it is in this moment. So just tune into that. Just tune into being aware of the ego and remain in this seat of higher awareness. And also, I would say it's really good to just make that commitment towards actually introducing a lifestyle in your life where you are more in the present moment all the time, because that makes this so much simpler. And it also makes it so much easier to understand when the ego is actually trying to get back in control, because you're so much more used to being in this state of higher awareness, operating from your higher self. And so you kind of instantly notice when the ego is trying to take its control back. And then you're like, oh, the little child is now trying to get love and validation again. And it is in that split-second moment that you can, instead of shifting back into identification with the ego and falling back into believing that you are the ego and reacting with whatever the ego is throwing your way, to now choose to remain in this present awareness and do something that comes naturally and easily to you, that gives self-care towards the ego. For example, you could perhaps... An example would be from my life right now. I have made a new commitment towards making videos here every single day. But from a split second like this, it can go from I'm making a video because I'm sharing my higher self into, if the ego does take over, oh, now the ego is doing it to prove something. Right? And then in that moment, it's important to have that understanding and awareness to realize, oh, instead of making the video right now, I should go and just do something that brings relief towards my ego. So in my case, sometimes I go to the gym, sometimes I just sit down and meditate and do something that brings what the ego needs in this moment, which is loving awareness and attention from the higher self. You can only ever receive validation and love from yourself. That is never going to come from an outside source, which the ego believes. It might believe that if I have this relationship, that or this person that can validate me, then I'm going to be loved. But the truth is that even if you feel a sense of love from the validation of another person, it is only the belief attached to it that is getting proven to you. So you're still just connecting back to your own sense of love and abundance inside of you, but you did it through the belief first of this other person outside of you. If the belief is not there, then you don't need this person because you just naturally tapped into it. But in some cases, people kind of think that, or have this understanding of that, if I have this success or this achievement, that then things are gonna work itself out. And then it appears as such because they're feeding into the belief as they're doing it. But in reality, they were just connecting back to the allowance of existing as they are through this belief then. So you always have the power internally within yourself. It is never outside of you. It is always inside of you right here. And it's always available to you. It's just that in some cases we take a little detour to get back into this allowance state through some mechanism outside of us. But then we're always at the mercy of whatever situation or thing it is that we have used in order to convince ourselves that we can have this state. And if you're finding my videos here, then of course you're not on that journey. You're on the journey of finding the true depth of your own love and abundance, which of course is naturally here all along and not through the belief of some mechanism of your mind. So in order to recap a little bit, the ego is going to throw its tantrums. It's going to go back to its old sabotaging ways when it is afraid of being in this moment with this abundance, because it reminds it that it's not good enough as it is. That's the simple explanation here of what's going on. And the only way to make it feel safe in this present moment again, you gotta make the mind or the ego feel safe in the present moment, is to show it that it's okay to rest in this moment. It doesn't have to act out itself to prove itself. And then in that it will find peace, and you can move on to new levels of your true self, which is that of abundance and success and love. And then that's going to be more reflected in your reality as you keep moving up this ladder of moving back into your higher self.